So let's get into it. Anyone know the phrase frog boiling? Anyone ever heard of this? This is a parable. So it's often used with climate change. The basic premise here is that you take a frog, and if you put him in regular temperature, you put him in hot water, the frog's going to panic. It's going to jump right out. It's going to be like, oh, I know that's no good, and jump out of your pot, and you won't be able to boil him. But if your water is room temperature, then you can just throw the frog in there and warm it up slowly, and eventually just be like, oh, this is like a nice bath. He'll be chilling, and he won't even notice that you've boiled him. And I think we can take a lesson from this when we talk about JavaScript tools and tools in general that we have in our development cycle. It feels like we have a lot of boom bust cycle in JavaScript and front-end development, and I think this can maybe illuminate why some of that is. So an average tool over time, like the average quality of tools that we have in JavaScript, is going to get better, right? I think we can agree on that. At some pace, tools will continue to improve over time. So when we create a new tool, like Ember or like anything else, it's because we see an opportunity. We say if I bring in single page apps, I think I can be a more effective, productive developer than if I'm dealing with the current status quo. And so we create something brand new, and we go from this struggle where we don't feel like we're doing very good when we start off, up to being really, really productive and feeling like we have done something that's unique and kind of different. But there's a problem in that once we actually do this, we've built a tool. So now we have code. That code's a liability. We have to maintain it over time. We're stuck supporting it going backwards. You've read No Silver Bullets, and you know that as we create more code, we have more complexity that we need to maintain. And at some point, at overhead, getting new people up to speed is expensive. Just making any change becomes more expensive than it used to be when you had a green field. But time moves forward, and the average tools are still going to be getting better. And you're stuck with this stuff that you're supporting. You have this liability. And there's a real risk that the tool that you built will one day no longer be as productive as even the average tool. You're basically just going to get boiled. You're not going to see it coming, because every day it's a little thing where you're like, oh, I'm still probably more productive today. But one day you're not. And that's the thing that we need to try and work around. A nice thing is that the frog boiling parable is just a lie. It's not actually true, which should be pretty inspiring because, as I said, this is the challenge that we have in front of us. Ember's a really productive framework, and it's maybe even at its peak level of productivity right now. We can do amazing things really, really quickly, but we also know that if we don't continue to innovate and find new ways to increase that productivity, we're going to fall short one day down the road. So if we're going to try and find a new way to make that improvement, to be more productive than before, we've got to talk about the web and how the web has changed. Maybe we can identify an opportunity that's in here. And I think the opportunity is one that you're going to hear a lot about today, and that is that the mobile web is a growing and more dominant thing. In 2011, when Ember was created, 4% of the traffic on the web was mobile. And in 2016, at the end of last year, it was 41% of all the traffic on the web. And we've seen real clients who have stats that match up with that, where they're shocked at how much of their traffic is actually mobile. In addition, the actual thing that the web is has changed as well. Browsers have a lot more capability, and users have higher expectations of these experiences. They can be offline, and they can install web applications onto their desktop, and they expect these things to work. Despite that, the fact that that's emerging, a lot of technology on the web is actually fallen behind. It doesn't keep up with those user expectations. And I think although it looks like it's a small difference here, this is a good illustration for it. So these are the load times of various sessions. This is a piece of data put together by Tanny Everetts. She works at a company called Shasta that was acquired by Akamai, and she has a book from O'Reilly called Time is Money, the Business Value of Web Performance. But these are sessions from a client of theirs at Shasta. And you can see that most users are actually getting this 3.3 second load time. This is a CDN company, so you'd hope that they had done their work to optimize this and make this pretty quick. But the lowest bounce rate, the spot where the users are happiest, is actually faster than that. So even the CDN company is putting out this stat that's like, oh yeah, we're not quite where all of our users want us to be. They still expect more. And we see that when you actually look at conversion rates as well. The best conversion rates are actually before where the bulk of the users are. And I think this is writ large across the web in general. We just don't do as well on mobile as users expect us to do. So my company, consulting company, Tool and Created, decided in January that we were going to play with progressive web apps a little bit more and try and make a demo app. So we made this app at shop-201.com, so you can use it offline. You can install it to your home screen, a bunch of neat things like that. It's pretty nice. It also uses Android Pay and Apple Pay. So you can, on your iOS device, you can pay with a thumbprint, which is kind of a neat feature that goes with this as well. It was a real learning experience for us. There we go. But we went and revisited this a few weeks ago, and I put together a blog post that's on my blog, madhatta.com, and we saw that the steps are actually pretty simple these days. You install these 3 add-ons, and you're good to go. There's an extension that Google has called Lighthouse that will give you a measurement of how progressive web app your app is. They give you a score of 0 through 100. After writing the blog post, someone else managed to go and use those instructions and get the whole thing working in about 20 minutes. And I think that's a real testament to the productivity of Ember that you're able to do that so quickly. This is great. We have this 100% score. Seems really fantastic. Who in this room thinks that they could probably do these steps in about 20 minutes to convert an app? Wow, really? That's it? Let's try it again. Who thinks they could do all these steps, these 3 add-ons? Who can install these 3 add-ons to build a progressive web app? I think it's pretty possible. Yeah. But there's a problem if we build this app using Ember. And that's that we do great on a lot of things out of the box. But this performance number, we didn't work too hard on it, but we didn't really pay attention to it. And at the end, we had this app that didn't perform super well. It has this speed to be interactive at 10 seconds, which isn't super ideal. And who thinks that they could fix that performance number to get it down from 10 seconds? Who thinks they could fix that in 20 minutes? Yeah, so except for Martin, who's going to tell you how to do it. Nobody really can. And I think that shows that maybe there's an opportunity here. It's actually pretty hard to fix this because you end up getting into JavaScript a lot, and V8 performance, and profiling, and accurate benchmarking, and lots of things which aren't related to your actual business problem that you're trying to solve. So with this app that we built, we have a progressive web app. We checked a lot of boxes, but we're actually off this chart in terms of the speed that we have. So we're missing out on all this opportunity that we would have if we had a better solution. And that brings us to Glimmer. So this is really the reason that the Glimmer project is created, is to be a mobile-first experience. So that same kind of ease that when you work with Ember, you get all these excellent things like a full progressive web app in about 20 minutes. Can you do the same thing with Glimmer and get a great mobile experience with that same low amount of effort? Another goal of Glimmer is to bring some modularity into the Ember project. A lot of things in Ember are in a mono repo right now. It's very difficult to use just part of Ember, and that's kind of like a goal that goes in parallel. So we decided that we would try out Glimmer a few weeks ago. So we took that same app and we ported it basically line for line over to Glimmer. If you want to take a look at the actual code, you can go to this address here, and it's open source. So both of these apps are open source, so it's a great way for you to kind of have a Rosetta Stone of Ember and Glimmer and compare them to each other and see how they solve problems in different ways. One of the things that we learned about Glimmer that's really great and kind of cutting edge is that some of the add-ons that we have work, and Robert's going to talk about that more, but Ember Service Workers works. Ember Web App to give you a manifest works kind of just out of the box. You just Ember install them, and you can get to work, which is really neat. So that's pretty great. And the really excellent thing about this is that out of the box, without thinking about it at all or doing any measuring or profiling, we got a score of 80 on performance. And I think you probably could sit down for a day or two and improve that score, because literally we have put no effort into this. And when we talk about Glimmer kind of creating a new opportunity for you to create web apps, this is really what we're talking about. Out of the box, it just creates a really good experience where your users are going to get more out of it. Just for context, we're basically on desktop. It was about 4 times faster to load that page, but that isn't a big number in absolute terms. It's only 219 milliseconds. Of course, what Lighthouse is trying to tell you when they ding you for being slow on the Ember application that we put together is that on mobile, it's actually a meaningful number. It's 1.3 seconds, which is far more meaningful if you're trying to speed up the web page. And this is only for initial parse evaluation and rendering, so it doesn't include anything else that was happening on the page. OK, great. Thank you for attending EmberCamp London, and we'll see you all next year. Maybe not. Maybe you're kind of sitting out there wondering why it is that we're talking about Glimmer, because you want to talk about Ember. And I think it's a valid thing to say, why should I care about this project? I'm an Ember developer. I have Ember apps, and I have all these things that I'm working on right now. And I don't build for the mobile web. It's not important to me. Doesn't really matter. I think there are 2 reasons that you should consider the Glimmer project important, regardless of that. And the first one is that you don't build Ember apps. You are not an Ember app developer. You probably are a web developer. You build applications for the web platform, and the web platform is changing whether you like it or not, and that will boil you if you don't pay attention to it. Your product or your application will not be as effective as you want it to be unless you start considering a mobile strategy at some point in the near future. So I think everyone in this room will probably be touching mobile web apps in the near future. And the second thing is that Glimmer provides us an opportunity to get some of these ideas to like innovate and try and create a cycle where we can push new ideas back into Ember. So we have a tighter loop in Glimmer. Glimmer doesn't have the same stability or semantic versioning guarantees. It doesn't have the same large ecosystems of add-ons that it needs to support in a backwards compatible manner. We would love it to have all those things in the future, but in the near term, they just don't exist, which is actually kind of liberating because we can try all kinds of new things and just land them quickly and get feedback. And then when we find out what works, we can bring it back up into Ember and get that productivity boost that we need to keep Ember a really competitive framework. One of the things that we're going to try and get from Glimmer back into Ember, and that we've been working on a whole lot, Isaac and I have been working on a whole bunch, and a couple other people have been working on getting the module unification project to work. So the module unification effort is an RFC that landed last October. It defined a new layout on disk for Ember applications. And it's already landed in Glimmer apps. So when you write a Glimmer app, it looks like this. You have this source UI, source services directory. Things are co-located, so you have a component, a template, and a test, and they all live together in the same directory, which is pretty nice. And generally, this is a much more rational system. It also allows us to do some things like local lookup, so you can have private components that are only referenced in a single template, which is pretty advantageous. So this already landed in Glimmer. To get this into Ember, we've been looking at it as a two-phase thing. So the first step is that we would like to take the Ember resolver and have the Ember resolver basically proxy over to the Glimmer DI project. So you'll install the Glimmer resolver, which you already have installed in your Ember CLI application, and it in turn pulls in the Glimmer DI app. It provides a module registry because this is the part of the system that figures out how to go from the resolver, which has a very specific protocol, over to the actual factories and modules that you have. In our case, in Ember apps, require.js. In Glimmer, this is a different system. It's not require.js. It uses rollup, so this is like a map of references to objects in memory. The second phase that we'd like is to really bring all that stuff that we did in Glimmer back up into Ember. So Glimmer DI itself is basically a rewrite of Ember's container system based on the lessons that we've had from having worked on Ember's container system for so long. So what we'd like to do is actually put that inside of Ember itself, make that part of the Ember framework, get rid of the old container that we have inside of Ember, and then we can just make the Glimmer resolver API itself be the public API for resolvers in Ember. And that would be great because the resolver API in Ember right now, I don't know if any of you have worked with having custom resolvers in your application. There are one or two entry points, but then there's a lot of like semi-documented entry points into that abstraction, and it would be nice to clean that stuff up. And we'll still need to define a module registry for that. So that phase 2 is something that we'd like to get to, but we're not there yet. We have been, however, working on the phase 1. And I'm pretty happy to say that as of a few days ago, all of the feature flags that we need to support this are actually landed in master or released versions of these various components that need to be altered to make module unification work. So you can actually create an Ember app today that uses module unification by using that command down there. It specifies a custom blueprint, and you need to be using Ember CLI 2.14. But if you do that, you'll end up with an app that looks like this, that has that same module unification layout. It has co-located templates and components, and just works like a normal Ember application, which is pretty exciting. And so this is using a stock version of Ember, the Ember resolver with a feature flag, and a version of Ember that has a feature flag as well. So that'd be neat, but a lot of you probably have applications, right? So something else that we've been working on is a way to migrate applications. So this page right here is the README for the Ember module Migrator. The Ember module Migrator is a project that will take your entire application and convert it from a classic application. In this case, we're actually using the real Travis CI application. And you can see we've got separate JavaScript files and templates, but we're able to load up the Travis app. Does what it should do. Once we've gone through these conversion steps, which for many apps should be as easy as running one script, if you have add-ons that currently have an app or an app directory in the add-on itself, then you may need to do a couple extra steps in order to load its initializers and in order to find its modules until we come up with a better story for add-ons. But this is an example here of the convert application. So you can see we've got the co-located components. We've got co-located tests that are in here as well. And if we go into the routes here, so I'm going to open up a route. We have our controllers and our routes in those folders. And we also have local lookup components. So in this template here, we have job wrapper at the top, and then the job wrapper component is defined here. So the module mapper automatically identifies files in your codebase, components in your codebase, which are only used in one place, and puts them in that correct local lookup spot and gets them out of the global lookup. And this also just works. So we have the entire Travis app converted and booting and running, which is a pretty great milestone for this. So I definitely think that this stuff is ready to experiment with. I don't know if it's, well, obviously I don't know if it's ready to deploy. Only you can know if it's ready to deploy. But it's definitely ready for you to go ahead and take the Ember module migrator, install it, run it on your own code base, go ahead and run that init step, which will basically create a diff of things that you need to do to update the application to make sure it will run. And then check out that Ember module migrator README for more instructions on how you would actually convert your application. Cool. OK. So I think I'm about ready to wrap up. I'm actually going to be early, which I'm surprised at. But yeah, so I've actually gotten pretty excited in the last few weeks working on Glimmer applications and trying them out in the wild, trying to actually use these to make mobile applications. When you actually go to analyze the performance and you see things like Glimmer actually rendering part of the page in like 10 milliseconds, it feels really nice to know that that's going to be a pretty good experience for mobile users. I've also been thinking a bit about this thing. This is the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which is a project that the US military has been working on. The project's cost about $1.5 trillion, which is larger than the GDP of Australia, for reference. The way that the F-35 strike fight, so in like the 90s, the US government, the US military was looking for new planes. And they're like, great, let's put out a bid. Let's see who wants to come back with a bid for these planes. We have planes we need for the Navy. They need to be able to take off from the deck of an aircraft carrier and land on the deck of an aircraft carrier. We need planes for the Marines, because they need to be able to hover in the air to provide air support for people. They don't need to land on short ranges. We need planes for the Air Force. They need to be able to go up in the air and dogfight other planes and be really fast and do tight turns and things like that. Well, like almost 30 years later, the project has been a huge boondoggle because they basically took wish lists from all these people and then tried to design by committee. So what they ended up with was a plane that does a lot of stuff, but it doesn't actually do any of it well. And I think when we think about why Glimmer has been extracted from Ember, why it is OK for it to be on its own and to be a little bit more experimental and freewheeling, that's the justification, is that giving Glimmer the permission to focus on just one use case and to really try and get a home run on that single use case is going to allow it to innovate and be great at something. And then we can take those lessons and figure out how to make it great inside of Ember as well. That's about it, so thank you very much.